A small boy in an oversized fedora lies flat on the concrete floor, staring at the ceiling with devastation in his eyes. Silent tears roll down his cheeks as he whispers to himself, "I'll never be like him. I'll never be good enough." This moment, this crushing defeat in a backstage storage room, is about to change everything. Because 15 minutes earlier, Michael Jackson had been walking through the corridors of Wembley Stadium when he heard something that made him stop. It was July 16th, 1988, 15 minutes before Michael was scheduled to perform for 80,000 fans at Wembley Stadium. He was walking through the backstage corridors, mentally preparing for the show, when he heard something unusual. Music. His music. Billie Jean was playing faintly from somewhere nearby, and beneath it, he could hear the unmistakable sound of small feet hitting the floor in rhythm. Someone was dancing. Michael followed the sound down a narrow hallway until he reached a storage room where technical equipment was kept. The door was slightly open, and through the gap, Michael saw something that stopped his heart. A small boy, maybe 6 years old, was dancing alone in the cramped space. He was wearing clothes that looked like they'd been cobbled together to resemble Michael's iconic style. A too large black fedora that kept slipping over his eyes. One white glove, clearly meant for an adult hand, so oversized that his tiny fingers disappeared inside the fabric. Black pants rolled up at the ankles. The child was completely absorbed in his own world, attempting to replicate Michael's choreography with fierce determination and surprising accuracy for someone so young. Michael stood frozen in the doorway, watching this tiny child execute a spin that was almost perfect, then attempt the moonwalk. The boy's feet moved in the right pattern, but his small body couldn't quite achieve the smooth glide. Frustrated, the child tried again, moving backward with intense concentration. His foot caught on the too long pants. And that's when it happened. The fall. His small body hitting the concrete floor hard. And now we return to that moment. The boy lying there, whispering those heartbreaking words. "I'll never be like him. I'll never be good enough." Michael Jackson felt something crack inside his chest. In that instant, watching this child's silent anguish, Michael saw himself. Years ago, when he was barely older than this boy, fumbling through his first dance lessons in Gary, Indiana, falling, crying, thinking he'd never master the moves. Someone had believed in him then. Someone had picked him up. And now, in a storage room at Wembley Stadium, it was his turn to be that someone for another child. Michael pushed open the door and walked in. The boy's eyes went wide with absolute terror. He scrambled to his feet, backing into the corner, his oversized fedora falling off completely. His face went pale, and his mouth opened and closed without making any sound. He looked like he thought he was about to be punished for being somewhere forbidden. "It's okay," Michael said gently, his voice soft as a whisper. "You're not in trouble. I just heard someone dancing to my music, and I wanted to see who it was." The boy's eyes filled with fresh tears, but now they were tears of disbelief. "You're him," the child whispered, his voice breaking. "You're really Michael Jackson." "I'm really Michael Jackson," Michael confirmed with a warm smile. "And what's your name?" The boy looked like he might collapse. "Tommy. Tommy Rodriguez. I'm 6. I'm sorry I was in here. I didn't mean to be somewhere I wasn't supposed to be. My mama brought me to see you perform, and I got lost trying to find a bathroom, and I heard your music, and I just wanted to practice." Michael walked closer and knelt down, so he was at Tommy's eye level. "You know what, Tommy? You're a pretty good dancer. I saw you doing my moves, and you almost had them perfect." Tommy's face crumpled. "No, I didn't. I fell. I can never get the moonwalk right. I practice every single day in my room, and I fell. I'm not good enough." Michael reached out and gently wiped a tear from Tommy's cheek, and in that touch, something passed between them. A recognition, a connection that transcended the gap between superstar and unknown child. Michael saw in Tommy's desperate eyes the same hunger he'd felt as a boy. The same need to prove himself. The same fear of not being enough. "You know how many times I fell when I was learning to dance?" Michael said quietly. "Hundreds. Maybe thousands. Falling doesn't mean you're not good enough, Tommy. It means you're brave enough to try hard things." Michael picked up the oversized fedora from the floor and carefully placed it back on Tommy's head, adjusting it so it wouldn't slip. The glove, still hanging loose on Tommy's tiny hand, caught Michael's attention. He held the child's hand for a moment, looking at how the adult-sized glove swallowed those small fingers, and something about that image pierced his heart. This boy trying so desperately to be like him, drowning in clothes too big, chasing a dream that seemed impossible. Tell you what, Michael said, making a decision that would change both their lives. How about I teach you the moonwalk right now, before I go on stage? Would you like that? Tommy's expression transformed from devastation to wonder so quickly it was almost miraculous. His eyes went impossibly wide, and he looked like he might faint from the shock of what he was hearing. Really? You would teach me? Right now? Michael laughed, a genuine sound of joy. Really? Come on, let's use this hallway. More space than that storage room. And that's when the second wave hit. The moment that would become legend. For the next 10 minutes, while 80,000 fans waited and Michael's crew frantically searched for him, Michael Jackson taught Tommy Rodriguez the moonwalk in a backstage corridor. He showed Tommy the proper foot positioning, the weight distribution, the smooth glide that made the move look like defying gravity itself. Tommy was a natural. His small body absorbed the mechanics quickly, and with Michael's patient guidance, he began to execute the move with increasing confidence. When Tommy successfully moonwalked backward about 5 feet without stumbling, he let out a shriek of pure joy that echoed through the corridor. I did it! I did it! Mr. Jackson, did you see? I actually did it. Michael was grinning just as widely. I saw it. That was perfect, Tommy. You're a natural performer. You got something special inside you. Then Michael Jackson knelt down again and looked Tommy directly in the eyes. The boy's face was glowing with pride and disbelief, still processing that this was actually happening. Tommy, Michael said carefully, I need to ask you something important, and you can absolutely say no. How would you feel about coming on stage with me tonight? Performing in front of all those people? We could do the moonwalk together. Show them what you just learned. The world stopped. Tommy's face went through confusion, disbelief, terror, hope, more disbelief, and finally landed on something that looked like he might actually pass out from the overwhelming impossibility of what he was hearing. Are you joking? Tommy whispered, his voice trembling. Please don't joke about that, Mr. Jackson. I would die. I would actually die from happiness if that was real. Michael's eyes filled with warmth. I'm not joking, Tommy, but we need to find your mother first and make sure she's okay with it. Where is she sitting? This was the moment. The third wave building. Within minutes, Michael's tour manager Frank Dilio had located Mrs. Rodriguez in section 214 and brought her backstage, where she found her missing son dressed in a perfectly fitted miniature version of Michael Jackson's iconic costume. The oversized glove that had swallowed Tommy's fingers was gone, replaced by a white sequin glove that fit his small hand perfectly. The too large fedora had been replaced with one sized exactly right. Tommy stood in front of the mirror, touching the glove gently as if it might disappear, and whispered with tears streaming down his face, I look like you. I actually look like you. Michael knelt beside him, and their reflections showed the superstar and his miniature reflection side by side. You look like a performer, Tommy. You look like someone who belongs on that stage. Mrs. Rodriguez stood nearby, her hand over her mouth, unable to process what was happening. When Michael explained his plan, when he looked at her with genuine respect and asked for permission, when he promised her son would be safe, she saw something in Michael's eyes that made her decision easy. This wasn't a publicity stunt. This was one artist recognizing potential in another and offering a hand up. She looked at Tommy's desperate, pleading expression and said yes. 2 minutes later, Michael and Tommy stood in the wings of the massive Wembley Stadium stage. Tommy was shaking, his small hand gripping Michael's tightly. Mr. Jackson, Tommy whispered, his voice barely audible over the roar of the waiting crowd. There's so many people. What if I forget everything? What if I fall again? What if I ruin your show? Michael knelt down one final time, holding both of Tommy's trembling hands in his. Listen to me, partner. You're not going to ruin anything. And if you fall, we'll laugh about it and keep going. The only way to ruin this show is to not have fun. So we're going to go out there and have fun together. You're my partner tonight, Tommy. We're a team. You ready? Tommy took a deep, shuddering breath and nodded. The opening notes of Billie Jean began, and Michael Jackson walked onto the Wembley Stadium stage holding the hand of a 6-year-old boy in a miniature version of his costume. 80,000 fans erupted in confusion and excitement. Michael performed the first verse as usual, then stopped and addressed the crowd. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to introduce you to someone very special. About 20 minutes ago, I found this young man backstage practicing my choreography so hard that he fell down trying to get the moonwalk perfect. The crowd made sympathetic sounds, 80,000 people collectively reacting to the image of a small child falling while chasing a dream. So I taught him properly, Michael continued, and you know what? He nailed it. Tommy Rodriguez is 6 years old, and he's a natural-born performer. Tonight, with his mother's permission, Tommy is going to dance with me. Give him some encouragement. The stadium erupted in supportive applause that washed over Tommy like a wave of pure energy. Michael looked down at his young partner and whispered, just like we practiced, "Show them who you are." The music shifted to an instrumental section. Michael and Tommy stood side by side. Michael began the moonwalk, gliding backward with supernatural smoothness. Beside him, Tommy executed the same move, his small body performing the technique Michael had taught him less than an hour earlier in the hallway. The crowd went absolutely wild. Michael Jackson, the master, and tiny Tommy Rodriguez, the devoted student, moving together in perfect harmony. Tommy heard the crowd's energy, felt their support, and something magical happened. He began to relax. His movements became more confident. He started to smile, then grin, then laugh with pure, uninhibited joy. Michael leaned down and said, "You're doing amazing, Tommy. Now show them what else you've got." Tommy, emboldened by the moment, began to improvise. He added a spin Michael hadn't taught him. He threw in arm gestures that were his own creation. He was no longer copying. He was performing, creating, expressing himself. Michael watched this transformation with pure delight and adapted his own choreography to follow Tommy's spontaneous creativity, letting the 6-year-old lead. The crowd could see what was happening, and the emotional impact was overwhelming. People were crying, moved by the purity and authenticity of what they were witnessing. For their finale, Michael and Tommy moonwalked together one more time in perfect synchronization. When they finished, they struck a pose together, Michael's hand on Tommy's shoulder, both wearing their fedoras at the same angle. The stadium erupted in the loudest applause of the entire night. Michael knelt down and whispered, "Take your bow, partner. You earned this." Together they bowed, and Tommy's face showed a transformation so complete it was almost unbelievable. The crying boy from the storage room was gone. In his place stood a confident young performer who'd just danced in front of 80,000 people and discovered something about himself he'd never known before. Michael carried Tommy to the side of the stage where Mrs. Rodriguez was waiting. The moment Tommy was in his mother's arms, he burst into tears of overwhelming joy. "I did it, Mama. I danced with Michael Jackson, and I didn't fall. Did you see me?" Mrs. Rodriguez held her son tightly, crying just as hard. "I saw you, baby. Everyone saw you. You were incredible." Michael stood beside them, and what he said next would change their lives in ways they wouldn't understand for years. "Tommy has real talent, Mrs. Rodriguez. Natural rhythm, fearless once he overcomes the nerves. If you want to pursue dance training for him, I'd like to help make that happen." The show continued, and for the finale, Tommy stood on stage with Michael, the band, and 80,000 people singing Man in the Mirror while this tiny boy in his perfect miniature costume danced with unself-conscious joy. The footage from that night would be viewed hundreds of millions of times in the decades to come, copied and shared long before viral was a common term. After the concert, Michael spent an hour with Tommy and his mother. He signed Tommy's glove, the one that now fit perfectly, writing personal messages. "To Tommy Rodriguez, my partner, never stop dancing. Never stop believing. You're going to do amazing things." But Michael did something else that night that nobody discovered until years later. He arranged for Tommy to receive professional dance training at one of London's premier performing arts schools, all costs covered anonymously. He connected Mrs. Rodriguez with industry contacts who could guide Tommy's development. The storage room fall, the hallway lesson, the stadium performance, they were just the beginning. Michael was investing in a future he wouldn't live to see fully realized, but believed in anyway. Tommy Rodriguez grew up to become a professional dancer and choreographer. He performed in West End productions, worked with major recording artists, and eventually became a dance instructor himself. In every interview, Tommy told the story of falling in a storage room and Michael Jackson picking him up. "I fell down trying to be like Michael," Tommy said in a 2015 interview, "and Michael taught me that falling isn't failure. It's just part of the journey." He saw potential in a 6-year-old kid who couldn't execute a moonwalk without tripping, and he gave me confidence that carried me through my entire career. When Michael Jackson died in 2009, Tommy was performing in Billy Elliot in the West End. He dedicated that night's performance to Michael and broke down during curtain call. Later, he released a statement. "Michael Jackson taught me to moonwalk in a hallway when I was 6. But more importantly, he taught me that falling means you're trying. That great artists see potential in everyone, even crying kids in storage rooms. I wouldn't have the career I have without that night. Michael saw me when I was invisible. He believed in me when I didn't believe in myself." The miniature costume from that night, the fedora, and the sequin glove that finally fit Tommy's small hand are now displayed in the Grammy Museum in Los Angeles. Years later, when museum staff examined the glove under preservation lighting, they found something that made them pause. Inside the fabric, barely visible, were the fingerprints of a 6-year-old child. Small impressions left by tiny hands that had gripped that glove with desperate hope and overwhelming joy. Those prints remain there still, a permanent record of the night when falling down became rising up. A plaque beside the display reads, "Worn by Tommy Rodriguez, age 6, during an impromptu performance with Michael Jackson at Wembley Stadium, July 16, 1988. Michael found Tommy backstage after he fell while practicing choreography, taught him properly, and gave him an opportunity that changed his life. This costume represents Michael's belief that potential exists everywhere, and that great artists nurture the next generation." Tommy Rodriguez still teaches dance today. He's worked with thousands of students, and he approaches every struggling child the same way Michael approached him, with patience, encouragement, and fundamental belief that potential needs only to be recognized, not created. "When I see a student falling, doubting themselves," Tommy said, "I remember being that 6-year-old on a concrete floor thinking I'd never be good enough. I remember Michael Jackson kneeling beside me and saying falling is just part of learning. So I try to be for my students what Michael was for me. Someone who sees them when they feel invisible, believes in them when they can't believe in themselves, gives them the chance to discover what they're capable of becoming." That night, Michael wasn't just delayed for his show. He was investing in a future. He was proving that 10 minutes of genuine attention can change the entire trajectory of a life. The story teaches us that the most impactful moments often begin with failure. Tommy fell. He cried. He thought he wasn't good enough. And in that moment of defeat, someone chose to stop, to see, to teach, to believe. Michael could have walked past that storage room, could have been late to his show for a dozen other reasons. Instead, he was late because he stopped to teach a crying 6-year-old how to moonwalk properly. That choice, those 10 minutes in a hallway, changed everything. This is the power of recognition. Not just seeing someone, but truly seeing them. Seeing potential where they see failure. Seeing possibility where they see limitation. Seeing a future performer in a fallen child. Michael Jackson that night taught us all something profound. Sometimes the greatest concert isn't performed for 80,000 people. Sometimes the most important performance is the one in a storage room with an audience of one child who just needs someone to believe in them. Subscribe now and share this story with someone who needs to know that falling doesn't mean failing. Tell us in the comments about someone who picked you up when you'd fallen. Hit that notification bell for more untold stories about moments when Michael Jackson proved that greatness is measured not by who applauds you, but by who you lift up when they're down. Because this story isn't really about a concert or a costume or even a moonwalk. It's about what happens when someone with power chooses to see potential instead of inconvenience. When greatness stops to teach instead of walking past. Share this story, because maybe somewhere right now, a child is falling. And you could be their Michael. You could be the one who stops, who sees, who believes. Tommy Rodriguez was invisible until someone chose to see him. And in that moment of being seen, everything changed. Michael Jackson didn't become legendary because of his stadiums. He became legendary because of his hallways, because of his storage rooms, because of the moments when he chose one child over 80,000 spectators. Sometimes the brightest star isn't the one on stage. It's the one who uses their light to help others shine. And that night, beneath the roar of Wembley Stadium, in a quiet space between falling and rising, Michael Jackson lit a spark in a 6-year-old boy's heart that still burns today. The glove in the museum, with its tiny fingerprints still visible inside the fabric, tells the whole story. Small hands reaching for impossible dreams. And someone legendary enough to make the impossible real. That's not just a performance. That's not just kindness. That's legacy. The kind that outlives stadiums and echoes in hallways where children still practice, still fall, still whisper that they'll never be good enough. Until someone stops, someone sees, someone believes, and everything changes.